the secret to success for someone who had achieved something great was that they believed that they made decisions and then committed to those decisions, believing in faith that they had made the right decision, and they moved forward, but they discarded what the other options were and fully committed themselves to the path that they were on. That truly was, rather than being a dismissive or disappointing thing, that was truly a secret to success that was being bestowed upon him by this person who had achieved so much. So that always, whatever it is that you choose, commit to that.
This week, I'm resharing an awesome conversation that I had with David Morris, who is the Chief Operating Officer at NeoInsulation. Now, David is the President and the COO. He oversees sales, field operations, and manufacturing, and he's helped to grow the business from being a niche company to a top-tier provider. But what I love most about David is that he shares a lot about the personal side of being a leader. He talks about, marriage and fatherhood and a lot of these other things. So in this part, you're going to hear us having a very wide-ranging conversation. We're going to talk about the value of being a generalist in business leadership, but we also talk about how midlife can bring career clarity. We talk about why it's okay to be unsure about your trajectory and exactly what you want to do when you're young at the start of your career. We talk about commitment as a strategy, both in work and in your personal life. We talk about the curse of having too many choices and how the proliferation of choices can stop us from thinking effectively and for taking a stand, from making important decisions in our lives. And finally, we also talk about how the struggles that we have as people shape us more than perfection does. And very often we strive for things to be perfect. We want everything to be good, to be easy, or to feel like we don't have to struggle for them. But actually, there is a lot that can be gained from the struggle, from the hard times as well. So if you love this, you can get the full show notes, the transcript, and read my newsletter at theknowledge.io. And you can find David online on Twitter at WD Jr. You can also learn more about his background and leadership at the NeoInsulation.com. And finally, if you love this episode, please do share it with a friend, and don't forget to leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts, because it helps us so much to find other listeners just like you. So you're a COO. What is that like?
It is almost impossible to say exactly what it's like, because what it's like is different every day. That's one of the things that I enjoy about it. So in my job, I'm responsible for essentially running the whole organization. So we have a manufacturing arm. So I help oversee our manufacturing. We have, of course, a sales team that's out. So I'm involved in direct sales myself. And so I have customers that I take care of. And then I'm also involved in leading and managing my sales team. And then we also have a operations side. So I've got offices around the country that have operations leaders. So I'm working with them, building their teams, redesigning processes and procedures, and getting feedback and troubleshooting issues that come up throughout the day. So it is literally kind of a new day every day. In fact, most days I come in the morning and I'm pretty disciplined about sitting down for 10 minutes and saying, what do I want to do today? And about 75% of the time, the next morning when I come in, I still have that same list, because something happened the day before that took me off that, and I didn't get anything that I thought I was going to get done that day done. So that's kind of what my world is just coordinating a whole bunch of different people doing a number of different things and trying to make it all make sense in our framework.
Was this always something that you saw yourself doing? Because I find that, at least in my mind, I see a lot of COOs falling into one of two boxes. I think you get the natural operators, people that were always operators and this is something that they wanted to do. And then you get people that maybe fell into the position because they just had aptitude, and it's just a role that they can use almost as a vehicle to still contribute within the business.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I'll give you two answers. So answer number one is no, I had no idea I would be doing this. From a career perspective, I've never been somebody who had kind of a grand plan. So I've always been ambitious, but my ambition has always had less to do with ambition in terms of accomplishing some career goal. And my ambition had a lot more to do with being the best at whatever it was I was doing at that time. So There's kind of some different ways that people do that, and like I said, some of them, and I know a lot of people that had a kind of a big long-term plan, and they kind of worked towards that plan, and they had an ideal position they wanted to get to, and they worked faithfully to get there. I've never had that. I mean, I'm still not sure what I wanna do for a career, and I'm 45, and I've been working for 25 years, so I think about this all the time. So, on one hand, no, this isn't something that I always wanted to do. On the other hand, what happened for me because of that in my career is that I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I just knew that I wanted to do a really good job at whatever it was I was doing. And so opportunities came to me, and I would try to be the best at that. I mean, I tried to be the best at, like, including silly things. Like, once for a summer in college, I worked at a bagel shop. Like, my job was to bake bagels, and I came in at 3:30 in the morning and fired up, like, did the first kind of bake up of bagels during the day. And I remember just thinking, like, I'm gonna be the best bagel baker that they've ever seen. And it was just no career benefit to that whatsoever. I did that for 2 months in a summer job,
Did you make
but
it?
but uh, man, in my mind, I was. There's no there's there's no way to rate yourself against the rest of the bagel bakers in the world, but it's always ingrained in me growing up that whatever you're doing, put your full faith and effort into it, right? There's nothing beneath you. If someone's trusted you to do a job, then make good on that, right? And do the job well. So I did a lot of different things that really came to me just kind of by way of relationships, and then I would move into a job, and I would try to do a really good job at that job, and then people would give me other things to do, provide additional responsibilities to me, and I would oversee something else. And so what happened over the course of time is that I just collected this very broad skill set where I had done a lot of different jobs in a company. I started off kind of in the recruiting world. Then that expanded into kind of some general, like, HR type of things. And then I was in leadership development and training for a while. So these things are all kind of connected to each other. And then at the company I was at, they just needed someone to oversee sort of a hodgepodge of things like the vehicle fleet and as well as the training. And then that expanded into they were trying to do some process improvement initiatives, and so they gave those to me, and I was responsible for that. And then they implemented a quality management program, and they put that under me. So all of a sudden, there was just a whole lot of stuff that I had done. And then I got into a consulting role for several years, and that was when I was working with CEOs and senior business leaders and owners and founders in that consulting role. And it was kind of the first time for me that I was in those meetings with those people and thought, "Oh man, I actually have something to contribute to these conversations. Like, I can actually, like, I know things that can help them. I know things that they don't know just because they haven't ever done that function before." And so that was a few years of that really kind of brought all of my professional experience together and said, "Man, even though I've kind of been all over the place and bounced around, that was the moment that it all converged into a, hey, this is actually, there's some value to this." And so the role that I'm in now was actually a company that I was consulting with at the time that then approached me and said, "We'd like for you to come in full time and into this COO role." And when I got into that role, I said, "Oh man, this is the perfect role for me because I am just by personality a generalist. Like, I don't have a deep knowledge in anything, but I can do a serviceable job at just about everything that there is in the business just because I've done that." And so, in the right spot, in the right application, when I found the COO role, I thought, it felt like I had sort of come home from a career perspective. So it's certainly the kind of thing I could see myself doing for the rest of my career. But based on my past history, I would always say to myself, who knows what I'll be doing in 5 years or 10 years, because something comes along that's interesting. And one of the things that I'm just motivated by personally is the chance to learn something new and develop a new skill. So who knows what that'll look like. But that's kind of my two answers. Had no idea that this was something that I even wanted to do. Once I found it, realized it was something that I really loved doing.
It definitely resonates with me personally, the idea of being a generalist. I think that is a title that suits me perfectly. And also, funnily enough, quite a few people that I've had on this podcast, I find it interesting how I think there's this narrative of maybe leaders or people that you're supposed to just have this desire in your heart, and you should always know exactly what it is that you want to do, and you should just be the best at that thing and build this skill set and just only be good at one thing. And there's a real big push to focus, particularly even coming straight out of college. In some instances, much earlier than that, actually. There's a push that you have to, figure out a straight line to follow and just keep going down that road until you reach some kind of conclusion.
And yeah, I agree. What's hard about it is that one of the magical parts of midlife is that enough time has passed that you've seen a lot of things play out. So when you're in your 20s and even in your 30s, you're still kind of in the middle of things playing out. So what's challenging is, and before I say this, I'm going to pause and just add a little bit of a disclaimer here from what you said. It is absolutely a valid path to know exactly what you want, to specialize in that, to focus on that, and to build your career around that. I've got a lot of good friends who have done that and have been incredibly successful and incredibly happy doing that. So I think a lot of it comes down to who you are and how you're wired. I would agree with you 100% that the message that's kind of pushed down to us when we're young is if you don't have that sense of clarity and direction from a career perspective, that something's wrong with you. That's a problem. And so that's the part that I wish we could correct to say, so what I labored under for many years was more or less, a sense that I was broken from a career perspective, right? That there were other people that I knew for a period of time were advancing, way past me vocationally because of that. They knew what they wanted to do and they focused on that and they specialized in it and they advanced. So it wasn't until I kind of got to that place I mentioned when I was in that consulting role that by that time I was probably pushing 40. I think I may have been right around 40 when I went into that job. It wasn't until then that the previous 15, 17 years of the nonlinear work that I was doing all kind of came together. And then what happened was at that point, I took this big step forward career wise and sort of caught up with all these other people that I had felt, quote, behind before that, if that makes sense. So the perspective of time, like I said, that's kind of the magic of midlife is that you've seen all these things play out. You've seen people who you thought were going to take over the world bottom out, right? You've seen people who you thought would never amount to anything do amazing things, and you've seen everything in between. It loosens a lot of your kind of like your grip on, I got to have things figured out because what you see is like nobody has anything figured out. And even people that think that they do, I mean, there is unexpected stuff that happens every day and things change really quickly. And I'm one phone call away from my world completely changing today for good, right? And I have no control over whether or not that happens. And the same thing applies in your career. Things change all the time. I've had people ahead of me in organizations that I worked in that I thought would never, ever, ever leave. That I was in, I had risen as high as I would because that person would never leave. And one day, out of the blue, I walk into the office and they say, I'm leaving. And the next day, the boss, two levels above me comes and promotes me into their position. And I never would have dreamed that that would happen. So if you can kind of loosen some of your grip when you're young on the idea that you have to have it all sorted out, and instead look at the other side of that, which is it will all work out given time. That helps so much. So I have a daughter who's in her first year of college, and it's been so interesting for me to look at it from that side of it because there's all this pressure on her to pick what you're going to study, what are you going to do with your career? And man, it's hilarious to me that looking at it from a parent, with my child trying to figure this out, that we would ever have any expectation that somebody who's 18 years old would have any clue what they want to do with their life, right? When you're 18 years old, you don't know what you want to eat for lunch, right? When you get up in the morning, nevertheless, what you want to do for the next 40 years of your life. I think that's been the message that I have tried to preach to people who are younger in their career as much as I can, is just if you could just relieve some of that pressure and take a perspective of it'll work out. And what's in my control may not be getting it all figured out right now. What's in my control is I can get up every day and I can go to the job that I have and I can work to be the best at what I do, to be the best employee that the company has, right? To make my boss's life easier, to be a joy to work with. And if I can do all those things, then opportunities seem to magically appear over the course of time, right? So that's always my encouragement to anybody is just take a deep breath. It's not going to work out the way you think it is. Nothing in life does, right? And so be flexible and be focused on where you are and being excellent in where you are. So anyway, I don't why do you think that's such a pressure on people when they're younger to have it all figured out? What do you think about that, David?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think there's a few things. One is partly what you touched on. I think when you're young, particularly, let's say your late 20s, early 30s, or even earlier than that, I think it's a combination of there's uncertainty because life is fixed, right? You only have a fixed number of hours, fixed amount of time. You don't know how long that time is. And there is a pressure that you can't go back. So you have to get things right the first time. I guess it goes to what you say about the experience where you haven't lived long enough to realize that actually a lot of times you can go back. And there's plenty of people that have completely reinvented their careers and reinvented their lives several times over by the time they're 50 or even 60 or beyond. And so I think when you're so early in that journey, I think it's this combination of there is so much uncertainty, but there's also a lack of control where you might not even, there's things you hope you're going to be good at, but you still haven't figured out exactly what your best foot forward is. You don't know exactly what you are best at for yourself, but also best at maybe compared to others. And so you are still trying to figure out, you're almost throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks. And you're trying to figure out what is going to work.
You said something interesting that spawned another question for me. It's just, I wonder so often where even this idea that you can like get it right or get it wrong comes from. I mean, that's one of the things like, I don't know if you have a spouse and children or any of that stuff. Like when you're raising kids, like you're getting stuff wrong all the time, but you can still in a kind of a wide angle perspective be getting stuff really right.
Yeah.
And so there's so many things like that. There's so many things like that with work. Like I've tried to just figure out what does it mean to get things right today, like in the smaller perspective. And that's probably if I get things right today in critical areas of my life, then over the course of time, that's probably means I'm sort of getting things right, at least, on the trajectory towards right, whatever that means. It's not like driving a car down the highway and you have one lane that you have to be in. And if you get out of that, you kill yourself or somebody else or drive off the side of a cliff, right? Cause an accident. It's a little bit more like going hiking through a beautiful place and there's a path that you can be on, but it's kind of wide. And there's some paths that go off over here, and you can go see a waterfall if you want to, and you can go sit in a meadow if you want to. And there's just a lot of stuff that sort of branches off of that. And depending on who you are, if somebody went on that hike and you said, "How was your hike?" and they said, "Oh, it was great. I walked the main path for a while, and then I went and looked at the waterfall." You wouldn't go, "You're a failure. What do you mean? You got off the main path and went and looked at the waterfall, right?" You'd
Yeah.
say, "Oh, that's wonderful. I'm glad you did that. That's an interesting experience. What was that like? Maybe I should do that next time. I've never done that part of the trail." And yet we have these things like work or career and parenting, relationships, and all these other things that there's this embedded pressure of there's a right and there's a wrong. And if I don't find the right, then I've missed it. And now, there's this dread of like, now that chapter is closed and I can never go back and change it.
Hey, we'll get back to the episode in just one moment, but I wanted to tell you very quickly about my newsletter. I started sharing everything I was learning online, and a few thousand people came along for the ride. I send 3 regular emails. Brainwave fortnightly on a Tuesday, which is about the intersection between technology, philosophy, and psychology. Then every week on a Thursday, I send Revelations, and that's about creativity and productivity. And then finally, every other weekend, I send Wayfinder, and that's about decision making. So people in the audience actually send me really tough problems that they're working through, and I help to deconstruct them using mental models and decision making frameworks. So if you'd like to subscribe, you can join me and over 20,000 incredibly driven people at theknowledge.io. Okay, back to the episode. Yeah, I think a big part of where that comes from, at least in my view, is this proliferation of choice that never really existed before. I think right now, you have so many options. There is so many more things that you could do. You have more options of what to do than anyone that ever came before you. That number of choices almost becomes a constraint because that is what makes you panic. And it's like, oh my gosh, I could be a lawyer and a doctor and an engineer and I could do all of these things, but I don't know which to pick. And so that almost stifles people's creativity and makes them less likely to try things and to pick and to see what happens because you feel like you have to make that decision, which is quite interesting because when you think about over time, kind of similar to the analogy that you use, but I think maybe one differentiation is that if you think decades ago, if you grow up in a certain area and your parents do a certain thing, the trajectory that your life is going to go down is a lot more confined. It's maybe
It's
not
fixed.
necessarily confined,
Yeah.
but more predictable. You are probably going to go and do something similar to that. If your mother was a dressmaker and, you know, your dad was a cobbler, then maybe that's probably what you're going to do, something around there. I think it's almost the difference between driving on a road where there's 2 lanes and you can pick, okay, there's maybe a slower lane or a faster lane. There's 2 lanes like this, and going on a big highway where there's loads of lanes and you are constantly moving forward and you can see all the signs. And it's like, okay, if you want to become a doctor, you have to turn off here. If you want to do this, you have to turn off here. And you feel as though you're on this conveyor belt where you have to make a decision that's going to take you somewhere else completely before it's too late.
Yeah, that's a really interesting perspective. I think your point on choice is really fascinating. I think the damage that choice has done psychologically to our consciousness is that it has eroded our ability to commit to our choices. So there's always this thing that happens where it's like, well, even something really simple. I chose to go to this restaurant and eat, and I didn't love the meal. Man, I really wish I would have gone to this one. And sometimes you go to the one and you eat, you don't like it that much, and you still go to the other one and get some stuff because you regretted not doing that. And so because we have such a proliferation of choice, we always have this thing in our minds that says there's probably something better that I could have chosen, instead of saying what I have chosen is the right thing and I'm going to make the most of it. My dad had this really interesting experience that he tells the story of. So my dad was an only child and his father died young, so he grew up poor and sort of had to make his own way in the world. When he married my mother, her uncle was this very big time executive at a big company based in Houston. He was one of those guys who had his salary published in Forbes magazine as like the highest paid executives in the United States. So my dad worshiped my mom's uncle, you know, as a young businessman, looked up to him as sort of like the pinnacle of success. And my dad tells this story of he had an offer to change jobs and he wasn't sure what to do. And he got a call one day from my mom's uncle's secretary inviting him to come to this big skyscraper in downtown Houston to have lunch with him. And so my dad said, sure, I'd be happy to. And so he went there and they went up, and it was in the old days where they had just like the executive dining room that was just for the senior executives. And so they go and they sit down, and Uncle John said, you know, I heard you're trying to make a job choice here, and tell me about that. And so my dad laid it all out for him. And Uncle John said, would you mind if I gave you some advice? And my dad said, yes. You know, and he's thinking, man, this guy who knows everything is going to tell me what the right thing to do is, like what choice I should make. And this was the advice he gave my dad. Whatever decision you make will be the right decision. And and my dad said, he was like, oh, he left the meeting and he felt so let down by the experience, and it stuck with him. And over time, he continued to think about it. He continued to think about it. And what he realized was that the secret to success for men like my mom's uncle, for anyone, but for someone who had achieved something great like my mom's uncle, was that they believed that they made decisions and then committed to those decisions, believing in faith that they had made the right decision, and they moved forward, but they discarded what the other options were and fully committed themselves to the path that they were on. And that truly was, rather than being a dismissive or disappointing thing, that was truly a secret to success that was being kind of bestowed upon him by this person who had achieved so much. So that always has stuck with me, just as a simple life experience that my dad passed along, with the message of saying, whatever it is that you choose, commit to that. Person that you choose to marry, commit to them. There's 100 people that you could marry, 1,000 people, an infinite number of people. People get all caught up and worrying about, have I found the right person, or right, all this stuff. The person that you married is the right person. So operate that way. The job that you're in is the right job. The career path that you're on is the right career path. How does that shift things for us if that's the way that we look at the world? Not in a, there's this whole menu of things that I could be doing. Maybe I'm doing the wrong one. Maybe I should go this one. Maybe this one will be better. Maybe this one will be better. And so that's the thing it reminded me of when you talked about just the saturation of choice in our world, is that it does have this sense, because to your point, 100 years ago or 200 years ago, your parents farmed the family land, and from the time that you were conscious of the world around you, you assumed you were going to spend your life farming the family land. I'm not saying everybody loved that life, and they just did it. And then it's up to each of us to decide to be happy in what we're doing, not to expect what we're doing to make us happy. That's just a different framework for how we go about living our lives.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's this really interesting balance. Particularly, I remember reading an article in the Business Review quite a few years ago, but it was essentially about the curse of optionality. It's a bit of a paradox because on one hand, optionality can be a great thing. That is something I was going to mention earlier on with, because it linked to something you were talking about, but this idea of being able to give great gifts to your future self and thinking of what can you do now that gives you more options down the line. Those are always fantastic things. Those are always things that can help you to grow and to develop. But at the same time, sometimes we hedge our bets too much and we are so concerned with preserving all the options possible that we don't make any choices now, or we make bad choices now because we are afraid to commit. I think it definitely goes very much following on from what we were just saying, where I definitely think that a lot of people are quite scared to commit to things because, there's the well-known phrase that comparison is the thief of joy. And I think it's very easy now to look around and see what everyone else has and compare that to what you have. And even if you pick something that you are completely happy with, when you see someone that looks happier with what they have, then you start thinking, did I pick the right thing? Does this taste as good? Does the meal that I sat down and ate, it tasted good at the time, but now I've seen another one on Instagram. I don't know if it was the best it could be. There's a person that I chose to be my partner. Oh, but now I see all these other things. Now I see all these other options. And even with that, I think part of the issue is that you don't always see both sides. Because the way that our society is, we just show you one side. We show you the good side, the best possible outcome of the alternative. So if you weren't doing this job, here is how glamorous the life of this other job could be. Or here is how fantastic it could be to be doing this other thing. But you don't see any of the negatives, the hard parts, the things that make it difficult.
If you were around me a lot, one thing that you would hear me say on a regular basis is that reality is no match for fantasy. Fantasy wins every time. And so you always have to be careful about what you're comparing, to your point, because what we live in to a certain extent, and this is what social media does, is it paints a world of fantasy. So you see really well crafted a meal that somebody who's a professional photographer has taken a picture of and put out there. Of course, it's going to look better. If you try to do it, it's not going to look that way. It's not going to taste as good. It's not going to smell right. So the idea that we kind of walk around all the time and project out only the good that we see. And, so I see we'll just use a spouse, for example. You have a spouse, you see someone else, and you think, oh man, this person would be so great to live my life with. I wish I was with that person instead of my spouse. Well, the reality is that if you were with that person, they would do stuff that's annoying. You'd get in fights about dumb stuff. They would call you on you leaving your dirty laundry on the floor, whatever, all these things in your current relationship that are causing frustration, headache, annoyance to you, that are spawning this idea that I'd be happier with somebody else. All those same things are going to happen with somebody else. They might look a little different, sound a little different, but that's reality. And so, one of the things that we have to be careful to do, I say this to my children all the time, is that you always have to try to project out reality against reality. If you project out fantasy against reality, then reality is always going to lose because it's real. And in the realness of life, there's a lot of dirt and grime and gritty and ugly and uncomfortable. And there's no way to escape that. There's no magic thing you can do to change your life circumstances to remove all of the difficulty. My argument is you don't want to, because it is in the difficulty. It's in the having to navigate and negotiate and work through a challenge in a relationship, or a frustration in a job, or that sense of feeling stuck or unhappy or discontent in your life. It's in the middle of working through all of that we experience personal growth. And that's what shapes who we are. And so everything that you are proud of, everything that you love about yourself, every sense of contribution that you make to the world, that has all arisen out of the things that you've had to struggle through in your life. And so if you try to remove yourself from the struggles of day-to-day life, you remove yourself from all of that growth as well, and all of the sort of refining that happens as you're facing all of that. My argument to people is always, yeah, fantasy looks good, but you don't really want it. And that's my argument to myself. You don't really want that. That other job looks really good. It might legitimately be a better job for you or a better environment for you to be in. Those are all practical, kind of pragmatic matters that you can evaluate rationally. Right? But you're still going to have annoying coworkers. You're still going to have frustrating people that you work with. You're still going to have a bunch of tasks that you have to do every day that you don't like doing. I mean, those things are just inherently part of our experience. And so you're foolish if you project out just the nice changes and you don't also keep as a constant all the other stuff you're going to have to deal with.
Thank you so much for tuning in. Please do stay tuned for more. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. It really helps the podcast. And follow me on Twitter. Feel free to shoot me any thoughts. See you next time.